So like Cam was saying, that's why I set up with the Palestine thing. Like Cam was saying, like these characters are actually based off Israeli Jews, which I did not know coming into this. I knew all this other shit I kind of knew, but I didn't know that
That's
that
wild.
and it's really weird. It's fucked up timing considering where we're at with Israel in this moment. But yeah, like so Claremont again, the guy who kind of rewrites them to be more complex and to be a little bit more interesting than they, or much more interesting than they were under Stan Lee's version. He said, "quote in a interview with Empire, on Empire Online. It's like a comic book place or just a place, not just comic books, movies, all that geek shit, right?" He says, "There's a lot of talk online now that Magneto stands in for Malcolm X and Xavier stands in for Martin Luther King." He said, which is totally valid, but for me, being an immigrant white, Claremont was born in England, to make that analogy felt incredibly presumptuous. So even he thinks that analogies don't really hold up. But he's an equivalent analogy could be made to Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin as Magneto. I don't know if I said his name right. Evolving through his life from a terrorist in 1947 to a winner of the Nobel Peace Prize 30 years later. Okay, I never do this, but I botched these men's names. So the name is Menachem Begin, not Menachem Begin. You will hear me say it wrong throughout the episode, but so it's Menachem Begin. I probably got other things wrong, but at least want to correct that. So he's saying that Magneto is actually, and we'll get into who Biggin was, but he was actually based upon one of the Israeli Jews who took Palestine from the Palestinians and
Eat
and did
shit.
and used terrorist actions to do so, and then eventually becomes a Nobel Prize winner because he became a prime minister over Israel. Which so I don't think he ever stopped being a terrorist. If you're prime minister over Israel, you're more of a terrorist than you were when you started. But so so and then that's Magneto. But then in another article I was reading, they said actually Claremont says he always saw Professor X and Magneto as echoes of David Ben Gurion and Menachem Begin. So David Ben Gurion is the first prime minister of Israel. Just to give y'all a sense. So let's deal with. So Professor X is supposed to be David Ben Gurion. David Ben Gurion is the Zionist leader of the Jewish Agency. That was the Jewish Independence. So they were before the Zionists actually took over Palestine from Palestinians and pushed out the British because there was a British mandate. Britain was over Palestine from 44 to 48. There was the group that was trying to get quote unquote Jewish independence in Palestine was called the Jewish Agency. This is who they're saying Professor X is being compared to. This is they consider one of the founding fathers of Israel. He united the Jewish militias into what we now know as the Israel Defense Force, otherwise known as the IDF, who is currently dropping bombs as we speak in Palestine. This is what led to the expulsion of Palestinians, what we know as the Nakba. And again, he was the first prime minister of Israel. So that is who Claremont, who wrote these comics, is compared. Who he actually sees Professor X
As
as
a
being.
demon. A demon who I hope is burning in hell. Every single one of his descendants also burn in the fire pits of hell. Then it was like Magneto is also based off somebody else who is equally as fucking disgusting and
Maybe even a
evil.
little worse.
Yeah,
Which
far
part?
worse. I
So
mean,
this, so this,
shit.
this,
All
this,
the Zionists are trash, but like this was a special
yeah.
demon.
So this
Like,
dude was considered too far right for the popular movement that was happening among Zionists. That's how, like, they were like, bro, you're going too far.
yeah.
We're killing. So he was a right wing terrorist leader. This is Menachem Begin, the one that he compares Magneto to. He
Mm-hmm.
was a leader of a group called Irgun. Irgun did what's called the Disir Yassin massacre that killed at least 107 Palestinian Arab villagers, including women, children, and carried out together on April 9th, 1948. So he was conducting like terrorist attacks against Palestinians because they didn't think that the Jewish Defense Force was going far enough. So they wanted to go further. Because he was the right wing side. They were the liberal Zionists. He's the right wing Zionist. So he becomes the sixth prime minister of Israel, and that's when the right wing party took over. And he founded the party, I think it's pronounced Liquid, or Likud, and that party is the party that Netanyahu currently leads today. Just to give people some context.
Another fucking demon.
So, but this man won a Nobel Peace Prize. That's how y'all know Nobel Peace Prizes aren't really serious prizes.
No.
I mean,
full of shit.
Barack Obama won a Nobel Peace Prize. He won a Nobel Peace Prize for what's called the Camp David Accords. They struck a peace deal with Egypt. And then he also led the Lebanon War, which, among many things, there was a 2-day massacre in 1982 between 1,300 and 3,500 civilians, mostly Palestinians and Lebanese, in the city of Beirut during the Lebanese Civil War. 1,300 to 3,500 civilians were killed, in a 2-day process. So that's who Magneto's supposed to be. But he sees it, again, in his quote, he thinks it is a positive arc, that Magneto goes from being a terrorist to being the kind of like leader of the state of Israel, or the leader of a state. Because if you read the comics further, and they did this in the newest cartoons, where Magneto, or Professor X, they thought was dead, Magneto comes and says, I'm going to be the leader of the X-Men, and he kind of tampers down and tries to follow Professor X's quote unquote dream. But he's comparing this to Israel. Now, he's probably just one of those, Zionist Jews that never really criticized Israel and clearly lost the plot. And then lastly, on that individual, Bijan, he advocated for the expansion of Israel's settlements in West Bank and Gaza. So he's one of the first people to like push settlements in Gaza and in the West Bank past just like 1967 borders. So we're dealing with that today, right? So that's who these guys are actually based off of, on the writer that really brings them to life. Not Malcolm X.
Nothing could be farther from Martin and Malcolm.
But comparing them to Martin and Malcolm, shit.
Yeah.
Comparing Martin and Malcolm, like, ugh, that's doing them.
I actually would have preferred it had it been what everybody assumed it had been. But then it goes back to like, and I mean, y'all have read the comics, that like when you then reread the whole story, or even as a movie watcher, and then like you rewatch the movies knowing this, it's like you feel disgusted that these are people that in a lot of ways you rooted for.
Yeah. I mean, we'll get to this in a minute, but like there's also this idea, this is the problem when like the Jewish challenges that people have are just compared flatly to Black challenges. And that's what a lot, because again, Stan Lee, this isn't about anti-Semitism. Nobody's being anti-Semitic, but these literally the writers were Jewish. Like that's just what they said it themselves. So there's an attempt to try to draw correlations that aren't really there, or are just poorly constructed, like we were talking about at the beginning. So, in a way, when you think about it from the perspective of Israel, then in a way, it actually makes sense. It makes sense why that their struggle is what it is, because one is literally saying, let's assassinate, or let's just genocide everybody. And that is one side of Zionism. Let's just destroy all of them.
It's Zionism.
Right. And then there's another side of Zionism that says, let's never really treat them fair, but we can coexist with them, but it's still our shit. That isn't actually a conflict amongst Zionists. So that conflict actually makes more sense than anything between a Malcolm or Martin, that's what's being expressed in the story, because liberal Zionists and right-wing Zionists have their own beef right now. That's part of why Netanyahu's going so hard beyond what he even needs to do, because he understands he's not very popular, and the more liberal Zionists could take power. But the right-wing Zionists have had power pretty much since the person that Magneto's been compared to, I think he got in office in 1977. They've been running the government. But when Israel was first taken over, it was actually a liberal, like politically, it was a liberal government. And then in 1977, it became a more right-wing government. And their plan is more just total like genocide, total like wipe away the Palestinians from existence. So now it actually makes more sense, you know, like way more than Malcolm and Martin. It actually holds up way better as an analogy.
And of course, it makes sense that from a propaganda perspective, when the movies started to come out, that they would then gas this comparison even more because they can't come out and be like, actually, these two characters are based off of my disgusting genocidal Zionist idols. And so, of course, then when the movies are coming out, nor do I think they would have got a lot of the actors to want to fuck with the movie to begin with.
No, because
Some,
they could
yes,
never say the quiet part out loud. You want me
of
to play
course
this?
not. And so it makes sense that like when you watch interviews with folks who were in the movies, and even when we saw that he was initially saying, yeah, okay, somebody said that, and you know, it came to me. This is how I saw it as a way to gas it. And to just roll with it because that actually is better than what came from it as a whole. And so then all of your actors can feel like they are a part of this story that is complex, that is nuanced, that has a larger premise that people can then feel like, even if it's unrealistic, that they can relate to in some pieces.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's like the liberal Zionist perspective.
Yeah.
I don't know if, to be fair, I'm not saying literally everybody in the universe that's ever done X-Men is aware of this. They probably don't even know if, I don't even think the actors, all of them even know. But that I'm saying that's the world that Claremont was building, even though I enjoy the comics and many of us enjoy the X-Men stories. When you sit back and look at it, it actually makes more sense that this is an internal Zionist conflict more than this is anything that has to do with niggas. Like, it's just, so this is a clip from the movie, the first X-Men movie that ever came out. And this is at the end, and this is between Magneto and Professor X. And again, they're still gassing this, you know, Malcolm X angle.
You know, this plastic prison, that will hold me forever. War is still coming, Charles, but I intend to fight it. By any means necessary. I will always be there. Old friend.
I never noticed he knocked the chess piece over. He mad, bro. but like, but but yeah, so they gassed that, and I mean, there's more, but even in the first class, the X-Men first class, the origin stories of X-Men when they showed them younger, both Michael Fassbender and James McAvoy are thinking about it from the standpoint of the Malcolm X, Martin Luther King thing and the different approaches. Even though Michael Fassbender admitted he never studied anything about Malcolm X, so just once again,
Worse.
so so anyway, that's that. So again, when we walked into this, I knew that the originals weren't based on it. I knew they added the story to Magneto. I did not know about the Zionist thing though. That was new information. I didn't even know. I knew they were written by Jews, but I don't inherently believe that's a bad thing or anything. So I just was like, all right, some white Jewish guys, whatever. I didn't know that it was that there was Zionist propaganda, whether it's intentional or not. Because again, Claremont was pretty open about it. Because again, they don't think there's anything wrong with Israel. That's the thing about a lot of these Zionists. A lot of these folks are brainwashed, so they don't see it. Especially, I think that interview was in 2023 before October 7th. No, that interview was in 2016, I believe. So that's a little older. So they just think it's just Israel. But again, the liberal Zionists think they can live with Palestinians. It's just that what they did is they turned upside down, and then they use these Holocaust analogies to make mutants out to more so appear as victims. But again, that's how Zionists see that. They think that what do you hear them say? Israel is the safest place for Jews in the world, and all of this shit. And we're not safe anywhere. If we're not safe in Israel, we're not safe anywhere. So there's this thing where the Zionist propaganda teaches that the whole world is against them. So they do see themselves as mutants in that sense that they're under attack by the rest of the world, and the Palestinians, the Arabs, the brown people particularly are a problem for them, and they want to kill them. This is the Zionist narrative, you know. So here we are. So,
What was it? X-Men? Is it X-Men 97 that's out now? Or what is it?
yeah, yeah.
I haven't got to watch it yet, but now I'm watching that a little bit different. Thanks.
Yes. Yeah. I live to kill joy.
I'm glad you're finally admitting it. Thank you.
I'm gonna be watching that with
if you want some more messed up information, this is more about an individual, but the director of X-Men, the first two films, and X-Men, he was the producer of X-Men First Class, and the director of Days of Future Past, Bryan Singer, who's also Jewish, is bisexual. So they also use the queer analogy, which I got no beef with that. But you learn that Bryan Singer is also pedophile, sexual. He's a rapist. Like, he actually has been kicked out of Hollywood since 2019 because of these actions.
each.
Like, that's why Phoenix was partially so bad, because he wasn't allowed to finish the movie. So they just kind of put it out. So just another, not a fun fact, but just another fact. So yeah. But again, these corporate things, they get swept up, and we're all caught up in the story, and they doing all this.